what is going to happen? I mean, this is the crystal ball gazing that we're all doing at the moment. The oil price is down. And I guess the first question to put to you is, does it all matter? We've got Saudi saying they're not going to talk tomorrow. We've got Iran, Iraq on the sidelines. If we do come up with an output cut, does it matter?
Curiously, it matters more in terms of the downside rather than the upside. So if this doesn't happen, we could see a slide in the price of oil that could be quite miserable looking. If it does happen, I think the upside is actually limited, $10 to $15 maybe over the course of 2017. Having said that, the Saudis would like to see this happen. However, it's clear that differently from the enthusiasm they had demonstrated a couple of months ago, they're now saying we're not going to shoulder the bulk of the burden. That is clear. So unless the key other players, in this case being Iraq and Iran, play ball, and we can have a deal that includes everyone, we are simply not going to do this.
Well, Iran has been steadfast in its comments that it is not going to discuss any kind of output cut until it reaches that pre-sanction level of 4 million barrels. What do we need, what does the OPEC organisation need to get everyone at the table and for cuts and for the price to start to increase?
The differences are really technical, which is why I wouldn't preclude a deal still at this stage. Iran is almost at capacity anyway, so it's not very difficult to agree to limit supply when production is at capacity given current investment constraints, etc. With Iraq, the problem is technical. Iraq has claimed for a while that OPEC underestimates its production levels, so the cuts that it's being asked to undertake are too big. I think that these technical differences are small, and so it's therefore still possible to have a deal later this week or next week. However, the upside isn't going to be very high, and the worry really is about the downside. The other thing that we've seen is that while China has not experienced a hard landing, there's not going to be a rapid takeoff either, and so demand from China isn't necessarily going to accelerate anytime soon, and that is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. The target of cutting output by 1.1 million barrels a day, is that target too lofty an ambition?
It isn't if everyone plays ball, and the Russians have indicated that if there is a deal, likewise, they'd be happy to join the cuts, although these would be more supply limits at the capacity that Russia is at today, rather than a cut which looks very magnanimous. It's really just a supply constraint that the Russians are happy to be at. And so it's feasible if everyone comes on board. It's not clear that the Saudis are willing to shoulder the bulk of the burden, however.
Now, the IEA predict that in 2017 it will be the fourth consecutive year in which supply runs ahead of demand if these cuts don't come into play, causing lower prices again, and you mentioned the downside. What will that do to this part of the world, and who will be the winners and the losers should the price continue to fall?
The winners will be the countries that have advanced in their diversification efforts. Certainly the UAE, Dubai, very prominently. The losers, I think, will be the countries that are still relying on big budgets. There are many countries in the region that still rely on big budgets. Those range from Algeria, amongst the oil exporters, Libya, which is in dire need of funds, having depleted its reserves over the past couple of years of civil strife, Iraq, which is fighting a war and needs a higher price, and obviously Saudi Arabia, which is the largest economy in the region and which continues to rely on a significant public expenditure pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Now, we are fast approaching the end of 2016. 2017 is just around the corner. What conversation will we be having this time next year about the oil price?
See what my crystal ball says. I do not have the feeling that the oil price will be vastly different from where it is today next year at this time. It's difficult to say anything further before we get to the OPEC meeting later this month.
Mm-hmm. And so your biggest call for 2017?
Oil more or less where it is now, diversification efforts being ramped up in the region, fiscal strains continuing. But I've said on the show before that I think overall this is a healthy thing for the region. The belt tightening needed to be done sooner rather than later. And if this is the time when these economies can start to seriously be restructured, then why not?